look at this. Oh, man. Here we go again. This is a dream.
My name is John Rude.
Josh Gold.
I'm Dustin Frisk.
And I'm Courtney Frisk, and this is why we drive.
Hi, I'm Kyle Smith with Hagerty.
Hello, this is Davin Reckow with Hagerty.
I'm Matt Lewis, and in today's DIY, we're going to be talking about wire gauge. So this I'm going to demonstrate what happens when a thin wire gets too much current. You smoked the tires of the whole 8th mile?
I've rented a wide open runway, and I'm here to find out, essentially, will the Corvair kill me? Hello, this is Davin Reckow with Hagerty. This is a members-only video on how to assemble spark plug wires and kind of some different things relative to caps, the different style of terminals. So just in general terms, obviously we have a spark plug wire. This is a cap. Caps come in two specific styles, we'll say, meaning you have the spark plug look or a plug style here, and then you also have an inside plug style. This is typically found on your older GM vehicles. This tends to be a little more Ford application, but then later adopted by GM. And of course, Chrysler's in that mix, not being the most aficionado on Chryslers. But anyhow, so terminal-wise, the terminals that you will crimp onto your spark plug wires are really two different looks. They'll be like this style where it has this spring-loaded piece over the top, and that's so you can positively snap that on. And then of course there's a boot. We'll get to that. And then there's also the style where this is a socket style, so where you push in to that, and then of course your boot was wrapped over that. So that's the basic two styles. Now when you get down to your spark plug wires, they will all look the same, meaning they will be something along, it's like this one. Now this particular one does allow you to bend it. So this is like a multi-angle. You can put it at any angle you need relative to your application. If you're getting around stock exhaust manifolds or aftermarket headers, as a for instance. Because I have one here, I'll show you. The last thing you want to do is have them lay against your exhaust manifold, because they will overheat, start to burn, and then short out, and then it runs like no good. So the anatomy, if you will, of a spark plug wire consists of a couple items. First, you have your outside jacket, which is typically silicone. And then on the inside, you will see here is a white layer on this particular plug. And this is the insulation. It can be fiberglass, all those, but think of it more like a heat insulation relative to the wire. And of course, just general insulation, so your wire is not shorting out. Now, the wire is right here. This is the black piece here. It is not typically a solid core wire unless you were running something much older. Model A's would have, well, not Model A's, but like a 30s car might have a solid wire. Race cars will tend to have solid wire. This is a kind of a race spec wire, but it has a spiral wound wire around the outside of the conductor, and this spiral wire around it on this particular wire is your RF or radio suppression. Basically, it doesn't give that nice buzz in your speakers as you're going down the road. This happens to be an 8.5 millimeter MSD superconductor wire. This is through Summit Racing, and this happens to be an Excel, and so does this. And this by no means is trying to push any particular brand. They're all good brands. Okay, so with that said, typically you get a plug wire in the bottom, so you could get your plug wires in a couple ways. You can get them where they're already, ends are already pre-cut and everything's supposed to fit perfectly out of the box as you put them on. Normally you get a custom set, which will usually have your connection at your spark plugs will be done. So it will have the boot on, whatever that boot may look like. It could be anything from a boot like this or a simple, I think this is one here, something along this lines. So you could have a 90, you could have a straight, or again, back to like a multi-angle. But with that said, once so you'll have one end on, and then you will have to usually cut to fit relative to your cap. You certainly don't want your wires to be stretched tight. You want them loose and not binding, but you also don't want them so loose they look floppy and get in the way and bounce on your exhaust and those sorts of things. And of course, if you had a wire, let's say, that ran from your coil here to your, past your bumper in the rear and all the way up front, that certainly is going to minimize the amount of current that it's being passed, and you're not going to get good spark at the end of the day. So you want them as short as they can be, tight fit, but loose and comfortable all at the same time. Real quick, a coil will typically have this style as well, like this style a cap does, the socket style, and there's some that aren't. So, but those are still the two different things you'll see. As far as cutting a wire, there are multiple ways to do this. There are specialty tools. There are simple tools. I'm going to show you at least a couple different ways. At a minimum, you're going to need a pair of pliers and some sort of cutting apparatus. Razor blade, it could be a carpenter's knife, whatever you have. If you're stuck on the side of the road, it could be a rock and your pocket knife, I suppose. But if you're in the shop, I would do a minimum of something a little better. This certainly helps you not alleviate the fingertips that you have. When you buy like some of the kits, custom kits, they will also come with this plastic with a metal sleeve in it, but this plastic deal. And what this is for is it's a crimping tool. So you put this in a vise and you crimp the connection here like you see on this. This is the factory crimp as an example. This is also a factory crimp, and this is also a factory crimp. So the idea when you're making these, you want to try to duplicate the best you can of that crimp. You'll notice that it has a couple things. It does pinch into the silicone very well, but it doesn't cut into it, because you don't want to slice it because it will start to creep, and of course it will open up as it goes down. It's kind of hard to see. I think the overhead might show you this pretty well, but you see and we'll go through this as we go, but on the factory end, the wire, instead of being like stuck in this side of the crimp, they tuck it up underneath between the large diameter of the wire. The small inner goes up and under the terminal, and sometimes you can see them, they'll actually protrude. So it's on this surface, not over here. Here you can see it on this solid core wire. So this wire right here, this is the conductor. So that explains visually, I guess. Okay. Now, question, how do you start? Well, what you're trying to get to is like this, but you'll want this a little bit longer, because you're going to roll this over like this, then put your terminal on along this lines. But again, this needs to be longer. This just happened to be one I had laying around. So let's take this wire. Now, just by hand, like I said, using the razor blade, I can come in here and let's say it looks to be about somewhere around there. Roll this through, not slicing all the way through. Turn it a couple times here. You're just breaking it loose. Okay. So now you see I've separated the This is the conductor. I separated the silicone jacket and the insulation. This is in one piece. This would go in the trash can. This will roll over like so. Take this and then crimp it on. Now I'm gonna, just for sake of using another terminal. So let's say this was my terminal. So I would set it in here like this. Okay. It's no big deal that this is sitting out here. That's not a problem. Okay. Now, one thing to think about is depending on the style of boot you have, you may or may not want to put this on yet. You may want to slip the boot up on here. And you could even do that. You could do that before you crimped it or cut it off, but certainly before you crimped it. It all depends on what style you have. Now, if you forget about it and you crimp it on, don't worry. It will slide on. It'll just take a little more force. The key is using a little of this dielectric grease that comes in most kits or you can buy separately, and basically lubing up the end of it and slipping the boot over. If you're short on dielectric grease, at least I found I'm never short of spit, and you can use spit. Anyhow, so we can use, for argument's sake here, let's take this terminal, and I'll slide this on first. And actually, I'm going to even go a step further. We'll start over here on this end. And when you buy the custom kits, if you will, they always offer lots of extra wire with them, meaning you'll have excessive wire, so you will have to cut off. These are actually from kits that I installed on different cars, and so there was that much wire on one of them. But you want to take and lay them out and understand how you want to route around the motor and such, because again, you don't want to get them on the exhaust manifolds and things, and of course route them, mainly so they don't get hot. But you don't want to also twist them around each other either. So if you can lay them and organize them nice and well, that will help from a crossfire standpoint. But back to this, so you have the end. You can take your boot, and hopefully it'll fit. Yeah, here we go. So all I'm doing is pushing this down. Now I have to make the corner here in some fashion, and that's where sometimes it doesn't make sense to have the connector on. Okay, so now I just come through like so. Now it's up out where I can reach it, and I'll do the same. So I showed you one method basically to cut this off, but let's use this. This is pretty slick because what you do at this point is slip it up in through this hole. And use this guide right here at the back. And that's your predetermined length that at least MSD says it needs to be. The difference is you will twist this. Now, depending on how tight it is to that wire, it could be a bear to turn. And if you have dielectric grease over your fingers like I do, it wants to slip, but we'll make it work. Hopefully I'm not moving this. And of course, you can lock this in the vise and it'll be a little less cumbersome. But the idea with this is you can only cut so deep. It has stops on it. In theory, it's right at your wire. So I'm going to pull it back out of here. You still have to twist it that little bit. And I'd recommend stay in the same direction. And if I got it cut all the way through, there. So there's my end again. Again, we're going to roll it back. Take my connector, slip it on, and you want to make sure, I like to have them sticking out a little bit, and you don't want this to be up too far, kind of centered around. Now, if all you have is a pair of pliers, you can take and kind of crimp them to the side usually, but you want to round that around. Again, looking at the factory one, they round it over. Right? So you come in here like this, and you see what I'm trying to accomplish is getting this curled over. So I didn't just come in and down, right? Kind of forming it to pinch it in. Okay. So something like that. I would like these to be a little bit further, but that's kind of the disadvantage of using just pliers. But this will function. I mean, it's on there pretty strong, and now you'll just push this over and up and in. Gotta make the bend is all like that. So this end would be done, and it's ready to, in the car, pop on, boom. That's a finished socket wire. Now, if you have the plug style, it's absolutely no different. It's just the plug is a little different looking. And to do that, I can use this then to crimp that. I can still use this to cut it. And the only difference is you take and set this into the vise with your wire in there, and then use the vise to pull it through. There's also, like even these simple wire pliers here, it's got all the stripping function for, any of your automotive wiring, but it also has, a specific spot relative to auto. And you see one of the things they're attempting to do is it has the curls built in on this side. The idea is as it comes, as you press it, it'll curl those edges down and in. I find that that's somewhat marginal. You usually have to play with that quite a bit. These pliers also have the same type of deal. You can see here where it's tapered in, so as it pushes, it's going to push those ears in, and the idea is it curls them as well. And then you have, I'm going to call these the Mac Daddy because they're ratcheting. I like these actually quite well. And they also have the curl in them and a stripper function and all that as well. So we will, but we'll stick to this for right now. Let's utilize this wire. We'll set that in here. This will twist a little better. But I'm going to, so I can hold it. Let's set it over here in the vise, just from a extra hand standpoint. Now it's a little bit smaller diameter than what this is for, but it'll work fine for us. Again, the same thing, run it up against there. If you got a good sharp razor blade, you don't have to saw after it. You can just spin your wire and it'll cut it. Okay. And still twist it just to get that final cut. Give it a little pull. Again, you're back down here. Now this wire, it has noise suppression, but you'll notice that it's not as tightly wound. This has like a graphite style conductor. And then right in the center, it's a support. So the wire, if you will, is actually the outside of the sleeve. The center is just for strength. Some wires will use fiberglass reinforcement. Others will use a Kevlar. It's all depends on the brand and the style of wire. So let's see here. Let's do a straight plug. Well, no, let's use this. So we're gonna use this style. This wouldn't necessarily be the cover I would use for that. Here. Well, let's use a better one. We'll use this. So this would be the cover that would go, your boot that would go here. Okay. Now again, I told you it depends on what style of boot you're using, whether you crimp it first or not. This is straight, so in my mind, I don't need to put it on first because it's quite honestly a pain to push it up and then back through. In this manner, all I'm going to do is I'm going to crimp the terminal on. I'm going to use some dielectric grease for lubrication and it'll just push into this hole and align it up, of course. Okay, so roll this over. Put our put our wire in with the conductor on the bottom again. Now this will go in this way because you want this detail that rolls these edges over in here. Now I found that from the factory these tend to be a little wide, so I still take and pinch them a little bit. Okay, because it'll go into my piece here better. Okay, now over here to the vise, up a little bit. You can pre-assemble this somewhat. And you don't want to get this up too far because obviously a spark plug has to come in here or your cap and make connection. If you have your insulation or your wire up in here, then it'll stop that from happening. And if you can lay this in here to start with a little bit, like that. You want to have this outside of that crimper because otherwise you will crimp into your terminal. And this goes right over the top. And if all's right in the world, this will crimp it nicely. It did twist a little on me, but let's see how it looks. So here you can see it twisted on me in the vise, but you see it crimped this side, rolled it real nice. This side's not as good, but I can quickly fix that with a little pressure for some pliers. And there. So that's a nice strong terminal end. Just put a little on the end here, and while you're here, it doesn't hurt to put some on the contact surface itself. Then it's ready to go right onto the part. Work it into the boot. It's all lined up into that hole in the vehicle. Here's your cap. And there's that on. Mixing brand, I'm sure somebody will be mad at me. Anyhow, so there's that piece of things with using the kind of the supplied crimping function. It works fairly well. Now, if you were going, and this will work for certainly more than just your one set. They are very durable from that aspect. However, if you want to spend a little bit of money on a crimping tool, this tool works phenomenal. It has everything built into it. So you would come in and decide, okay, how long do I need it to be? As far as my wire hanging out, say roughly here. And give it a little twist. And boom, there's your end of your wire. And just to see it real easy, fold it back again, put this connector over it, and then get this. Well, here we still got the same problem with these being a little spread. Of course, you have to locate your folding section relative to your ears on the terminal. I say that's real easy and then I have a hard time getting it in the tool. Okay, so along this lines, all right, you can see I need to twist this so it lines up better. Okay, why am I having problems here? Get this a little tighter. Oh. See, and it's not always as easy as it seems. There, that'll help. Come in here. Okay, so now I got her lined up. So it's all lined up there. It's taken. Again, you'll hear the ratchet into things. Pull it out. And right there, that'd make your daddy proud. Look at that. Slip your boot on. Pop it onto the cap or your coil. You'll be going down the road. Okay, that's the basic side of that. Again, you go through, you crimp out, you cut off your insulation. You do not want to remove this. This is your conductor. Fold it back, crimp it on, using whatever tools you have at hand. This certainly works, in my opinion, the best. This works very well. And this is what you have to do if you're on the side of the road going, oh bugger, it just pulled off. There. Now, with that said, I think that's about it here. Let's open it up for questions out to the members and see what you got. All right, so we have Don Procco. In the 60s, we considered these wires crap and used solid core. I remember seeing some fail where they fold back from the core, where manufacturers mandated to use this type of RF suppression. Well, the wires in the 60s did not have RF suppression. If they're solid core, they will, I mean, I shouldn't say they didn't have RF suppression wires, but a solid core wire does not have suppression. That is what makes your TV, if you will, when the snowmobiler goes by and your TV gets all flaky, at least in the old analog days. I guess I'm not sure what the digital does anymore. But so the new wires, it has that suppression around it, and it's basically, think of it as like a coax cable where you have the ground wire on the outside, and it's protecting that, diminishing that interference from going out. Any of you using modern suppression cable other than RF? Certainly modern materials should be better than the old materials that we used back. I'd say there's a reason they've been replaced. Okay, where can you buy the wires and terminals? Local hardware or part stores will have different wires. They certainly will always have a custom set. They typically, if you go in with your year, make, and model, with an exception of probably 70 and back, and you will grab them, plug them on, and away you go. You won't have any fitment to use. But when you get into custom applications and older vehicles, they will be more of a universal style. Any of your online parts warehouses will have them. I can think of numerous that have the wires. There's multiple brands of wires. And I'll leave it here. It's just like a car manufacturer. We all have our favorites. And I can't really say that one is specifically better branded than the others. And as far as your terminal pliers, same thing. They can be found a little more specific relative to maybe a larger warehouse or such than just your corner hardware store. How, where, and why to use dielectric grease? Brian, that's a fantastic question. So the function of dielectric grease is to basically minimize your corrosion and improve your contact between terminals. So specifically here, at your contact surface of your terminal top and then your contact of your wire as it snaps on, the dielectric grease helps that not be corroded. In fact, if you look into this, you will see this coil did not have any such thing. In just basically a brass contact going into that, with any moisture that gets in will cause that type of corrosion. To minimize that, dielectric grease works fantastic and is what's made for electrical connections. I also use it relative to putting on the boots here. Maybe put a little bit on there, and as it pops on, we've all had those spark plug wires that are a bear to get back off, and that will help relieve that stiction when you pull them off. And then also obviously using the dielectric grease to slip the boots onto the wires. Wire resistance. Yes, there are multiple wire resistances out there. It tends to be relative to what you pay for. I know one brand has a 50 ohm or less per foot. The less resistance is the more power that's supplied to your plugs. So I always look at it as the lower the number, the more power I'm getting to my plug, and the better things are going to be. So that's my thought on that. And then you also get into like diameters of wire, the overall. So there are they kind of start at about 6 millimeter, and they measure the OD of the sleeve. So that's really your insulation factor. The centers typically don't change a whole lot. But then you have, 6, 7, 8, 8.5, 8.8, and I've seen up as far as 10 and even a 12. And when you're getting into that, you're getting into top fuel motors, and where they really are pushing a lot of current down through there, and they want a lot of protection so it doesn't leak per se. Oh, okay, so pulling the spark plug boots, sure. So Don's question is, how about mentioning pulling the spark plug boots off? So specifically, there is a tool that you can grab onto a spark plug boot. Let's say something like this. I don't have one here, but it's fairly long and slender, and it typically have some sort of rubber cushion on it so it doesn't pinch or cut into the boot. The idea is that if you have access to them, you can reach down, grab them, and pull them off. What I typically do, again, I put dielectric grease on everything when I install it. That helps it come off. But usually if you can get down to it and you grab a hold of it and you can twist it a little bit, you'll break it loose. Similar to if you remove a water hose off your radiator, you just break it loose, and then it'll come loose and it'll come free. It's usually gripped on the OD. It's not so much the terminal itself. And give it a quick rotation and it'll pop loose. If you're replacing the plugs, right here, reach down, grab it, still give it a twist, but pull them off. So if you're replacing plug wires and you don't care about damaging the boot, a good old-fashioned pair of pliers works fine. But if you're trying to just inspect plugs or just replace plugs and you're keeping that wire, reach down, grab it, and give it a pull. And you do want to grab the whole thing, just like your electrical cord going into the wall. Don't grab it by the wire, because you do run the risk of yanking this terminal end off, regardless of how good this crimp is. The wire's not a handle, I guess. Let's see, we got the custom kits allow for mistakes, like too short, or you get it right the first time. I would recommend getting it right the first time. However, yes, there's always lots of wire available in a custom kit. This is pretty standard. If you will, if you're going to, a back plug on a GM motor and you only need something about this long, you will get a wire that's this long in that kit. But if you cut it here, you can't add to it. So what I like to do is I will take and lay all the plug wires out, figure out the lengths, because sometimes they'll be a little bit different lengthwise in the kits even. Lay them out, 2, 2, and 2, and then pre-assemble them onto the plug wires, figure out my routing before I cut anything. I've even taken to the point where, run it down in and try a couple different routings, especially like above or below headers. Sometimes plug wires go over top of the valve covers. Sometimes they go, just kind of across the exhaust manifolds. Other times they'll actually go up underneath. I just saw one yesterday that it ran it up through underneath the intake manifold and came off the front side, which was interesting, but worked really well to protect them. But the key is put it on the spark plug, run it, even temporary put it down, zip ties, bread ties, anything that's, call it from a temporary standpoint, and then trim it to fit. Like if I were going to do this, I would say, okay, here's my cap, run it up here. Okay, it sits nice here, so I'll use my finger or thumb and give an idea for a marker, come in and then just cut it off with any set of side cutters and bounce that off, and then trim and cut the wires. The other thing too to kind of watch for is these have a place they kind of want to be. So in other words, if they're like this, you've got to twist them and you're going to be fighting it. So you kind of want them to lay natural. This would be the upside then. And then we'll crimp it, you roll it back to crimp it. And then you're not fighting a twist. The overall look will be a lot better. So failed spark plug wires. Certainly. A big issue is a wire that will be too loose, and you don't realize it until you're going down the road and it's flapping, and it will, because you get some airflow up underneath the hood or just general vibration, and then it's laying against the exhaust manifold. Headers tend to be a little more of an issue than exhaust manifolds because that surface temperature is a lot higher on a header. But, there's different things you can do. If you have a spot that's ridiculously tight, there's nothing you can do about it. It has to basically lay against it or so marginal of space that there are Kevlar, they're like a Nomex sleeve that slides over, and you can even sleeve the wires. There are wires that actually come sleeved the whole length, typically in a race application. But alongside the road, yes, I've had to change the whole set of plugs. Specifically, it was on a Model A, and during the Great Race. And Jonathan and I knocked that out and made our start at least. All right, we have, when building wires, is it better to start from the plug or distributor? I would start from the plug. Or maybe a better way to look at it is, depends on which end is started. You can buy wire in a big roll. If you're a shop, you could buy this in, say a 100-foot roll. The average guy is never going to need 100 feet of spark plug wires. So you typically will have a kit. Normally the kits are factory crimped at the plug. So that's why I always start at the plug and then route up to the distributor. If for some reason you were running, you just had a bare wire in making something from brand new, it kind of depends on the situation. You have to look at it and decide what makes sense. All right, so how best can you tie wires together to make them neat and to prevent flapping around? Okay, so from a stock standpoint, most vehicles will have some sort of wire separator. And the idea is, it's not only just from a clean look of an organization, and I don't happen to have one sitting here, but they're like I'll use my fingers. So they're like a tree. So you'll pop them down in here, right? And they separate them out like such. And the idea is, A, they look neat and clean, but B, you don't want to do this. And the reason is, as current is running down through the wires, they tend to have an issue with crossfiring, or can have crossfiring issues, regardless of the amount of insulation that are on the wires. Granted, the thicker wire will be less likely to crossfire than a thinner wire, but you still try to avoid that type of function. I remember there was one Ford truck in the mid-'80s that it was very specific on the radiator support. There was a sticker that said how you had to run, I think it was 2 and 8, that you had to specifically route it one direction versus another. And that was because they had a firing relative to the firing order, you know, they're very specific on how they wanted you to route that wire to avoid that crossfire. And then as far as, you know, a cheap and simple way is zip ties. One of the things I'll do, if I don't have any of the fancy wire separators, what I'll do is I'll take just a plain old zip tie, wrap it around the bundle loosely, and then at every wire, take and wrap another one loosely around each one of these, right? And then the idea is you pull them a little bit tight and a little bit tight until you have, you know, a nice separation, which I could probably grab some if we want to see that. Want to do that? So here, I'll show you what I mean. So just as a real simple piece, here, let's get these out of the way. And just so we're running, here, we'll go this. We got nice contrasted color, red and blue, a couple of my favorite colors here. All right, so you got your 2 wires. Make sure we can see this fine. So you just doing 2 wires. You can do this for more, you just need a longer zip tie, the big one. So you take and just start this zip tie. You can, you know, once you get fancier, you can position the end wherever you like it. But you do that. Then you take this one and go between it, like so. Oh, wouldn't you know, I grabbed the cheap one. Okay, let's try that again. Okay, so now I'll take and pull this right tight. Okay, like so. Now, as you work this across, I'm trying to make sure my hands are out of the way here. See this work. So now what I'm doing, so what I did is I pulled this over. I'll say as tight as I can get it. I'm not trying to pinch this, mind you. Pinch the wire, the sleeve on the plug wire. Now, when I pull this leg, it's gonna pull that loop tight. Sometimes a pair of pliers helps. All right, so you pull this up like that. Now you get rid of these ugly ends. Let's see, this will probably work pretty good. So that gives you that separation. And I've had these where, you know, you'll have all 4 across. It cleans up, looks real nice, quite honestly, especially if you take a little more time and trim these tighter. And I'll actually even spin these so it looks like that instead in the car. I've used these for years on race cars because you tend to pull off your whole set of wires at a time. And if you trim them, you would be just like this. You know, your length going to your cap is over here. These go to your spark plugs, and it kind of dummy proofs it as far as where they go then as well. If you set them up, you can have them, you know, 2, 4, 6, 8, and then 2, 4, 6, 8, meaning your longest is out here, and then you set them right up there, and it's just boom, 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 plug them in, and away you go. Okay. Brandon, how long should plug wires last? That is a good question. So, typically speaking, you know, in the 60s, you had to change plugs and wires every, gosh, it seemed like 30, 40,000 miles. Nowadays, plugs run for 100,000 miles pretty easily on a daily driven car. And on, so, you know, you're looking at, say, 8 to 10 years. Now, on a street or on a classic car that you know, that's not seeing that type of mileage and wear, and if it's not out, you know, like something that's exposed in the sunshine, because of course sun always eats stuff and dries it out, the silicone. So you tend to probably change them sooner. But I would say you're looking at, boy, I don't know, probably Almost indefinitely, quite honestly, because I'm thinking of my Chevelle that I restored back in '96, and I've yet to change the plug wires on that, and I've had no issues. But at the same token, it's only probably has 10,000 miles on it. So I would estimate anywhere between running things hard, even like in a racing situation, barring any burning function on headers, you're looking at 5 years at a absolute minimum, and then out as far as I don't want to say indefinitely because that wouldn't be good. As far as how you would check if they're bad, kind of a simple flexibility. If you look through them and they have a burn problem, a physical, like this boot has a physical burn on it, that's what silicone will look like when it burns. It gets kind of nasty looking there. And then, but otherwise, just condition. If you go in and pull your plugs to check your plugs and your boot yanks off and the terminal comes with it and it tears stuff, you can cut that off and reattach it. But in general, it's kind of a visual, looking nasty. I would suspect that all of us replace them sooner than they need to. If you think you have a plug wire that has an invisible crack, so to speak, into it, a real easy trick is to start the car up, shut off all the lights in the building, and take a spritz can of water and spritz it over your electrical wires and look for the electrical show. Because if it has any leakage through the silicone boot as it's passing that current through, the water will give it that amount of conductivity, and you will get an arc, and it'll look like you'll have your own little lightning show in the garage. It's not dangerous. There is no concern there, but it will help you pinpoint if you have one specific spot. Does it hurt to cross wires at the distributor cap? And should they be separated? That's a very good point. I do my best not to, but at the end of the day, there is not a single, for the most part, there isn't a single cap that doesn't have, that's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 all the way around. It's always, like a GM is 1843 so you have some intermix. And if nothing else, you have intermix going from bank to bank. So you're going to have some. I try to avoid doing this, like as far as like going right over the top like that. If you have to cross because one's short or whatever the scenario is, I would try to route it, as tight as possible here, using the cap to kind of hold it. The other option, obviously, is to come out and around or such. But yes, if you can avoid it, try to keep them from, really wrapping around. There are situations where there's no good way around it. GM has one cap that they used in the 90s that is a finger cap, and even those weren't great caps to begin with, but they helped out as far as, all the evens went to one side and all the odds went to the other, and they were a lot better. They had kind of their own issue. All right, I think we got everybody's questions covered. And certainly, if there's something else that comes up that you have a question, send us a note and ask us the question. I think I went over everything. If there's any details as far as specifically where to find these items, we can certainly provide that as well. But other than that, thank you for joining us today. Hopefully this was informative, and it keeps you on the road, having fun, and keeping a smile on your face, because for me, that's what driving these old cars are all about, and maybe just the pure satisfaction of doing it myself. Hey, until next time, have a great day.